Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a topic that can seem, well, incredibly complex, infusion coding. But don't worry, we're going to break it down. Let's get right into it. You see an IV and it looks pretty straightforward. But when it comes to billing for infusions and injections, it feels like you need a secret decoder ring. It's just filled with all these specific rules and exceptions. But what if I told you there's a simple logic to it all?
And there really is. The good news is that there's a clear method to the madness, and it all comes from one single foundational principle. Once you get this one rule down, I promise everything else just clicks into place. So let's uncover that principle right now.
Okay, before you even think about picking a single code, you have to know the pecking order of services. This is called the infusion coding hierarchy, and honestly, it's the most important rule of all.
Think of this hierarchy as your ultimate decision-making tool. The service that's highest on this list, from chemotherapy infusions way up at the top, down to hydration at the very bottom, that's always going to be your initial service. This one rule dictates your primary code for every single patient visit. It's that simple.
So, once you've got it in your head that the hierarchy is king, you can navigate pretty much any coding scenario out there. And you do it with a simple 4-question roadmap. This right here, this is your guide. It's not just a random list, it's a process. You have to ask these 4 questions, and you have to do it in this order. And if you do, you can logically and systematically find the right codes every single time. So let's start with that first and arguably most important question. So our first and most critical question is, why is the patient here? And asking this is all about identifying what we call the initial service for the encounter. Now listen up, because this is the part that trips up so many people. The initial service has absolutely nothing to do with what was given to the patient first. It's all about the primary reason for that visit, which you figure out by looking back at that hierarchy. The highest ranking service on that list, that is always your initial service. And this rule is pretty firm. You can only report one initial service per encounter. Now, there are a couple of very specific exceptions, like if 2 separate IV sites are medically necessary, or if a patient physically leaves and then comes back later that same day for a totally separate treatment, but those are rare.
Okay, so after you've answered why, the next step is usually pretty easy, figuring out what substance was given. But the real complexity, the part where a lot of coders get tangled up, comes from our third question: how was it given? This is where we have to really understand 2 key terms, sequential and concurrent.
The difference seems subtle, but it's critical. Sequential is just what it sounds like. You're infusing drugs one after the other, back to back, through the same IV line. Concurrent, on the other hand, means multiple drugs are flowing at the exact same time, from different bags, but into that same IV line. Getting this right is absolutely crucial for picking the correct add-on codes.
Okay, so theory is great, but let's make this real. We're going to use hydration as a case study. It's a perfect example to see how all these rules and our 4 questions actually work together in the real world. First question, why? For hydration, this is everything. You absolutely have to prove why it was medically necessary. You can't just write down to hydrate the patient. I mean, that's not going to fly. You have to justify billing for it. Your documentation has to paint a really clear clinical picture. You need to show things like the patient can't drink, or there are documented signs of dehydration, abnormal vital signs, or lab results like an elevated BUN or creatinine. And here's a pro tip. Just documenting nausea on its own isn't going to cut it. All right, now for our last question. How long did it take? Let me tell you, when it comes to hydration coding, the clock is absolutely critical. The total time the infusion runs directly impacts whether you can bill for it at all and how you do it. 31. Remember this number. This is the magic number for hydration. You have to document a bare minimum of 31 minutes to be able to bill for that initial service. 30 minutes? Nope, not reportable. 31? You're good to go. So as soon as you hit that 31-minute mark, you can bill for the first hour of hydration. But to bill for a second hour, the infusion has to run for a total of at least 91 minutes. And each additional hour after that has its own time threshold you have to meet. And this is exactly why documenting those start and stop times with precision isn't just a good idea, it is absolutely essential for correct and compliant billing. If you don't have those times, you've got no proof you met the requirements. It's as simple as that. Now, it's just as important to know what does not count as billable hydration. If that fluid is just there to keep the vein open, a KVO line, you can't bill for it. If it's the liquid being used to carry another drug,
you can't bill for it separately. And you definitely can't bill for hydration if it's running at the same time, concurrently, with another infusion.
Whew, okay. We've gone through a ton of ground here, from hierarchies to hydration times. So what are the most important things you need to walk away with? Let's do a quick recap of the core principles. These are really the 4 pillars of infusion coding. First, master that hierarchy. Then, for every single encounter, walk through those 4 questions. Third, track your time down to the minute. And finally, make sure that clinical documentation backs up and justifies every single service you report. So I'll leave you with this question. With all these rules in your back pocket, what's the very first thing you're going to check on the next infusion chart you see? Will it be the hierarchy, the start and stop times, the documented reason for the visit? Applying this simple, logical framework, that's the key to coding with total confidence.